critical thinking, if you have one idea that follows the identical logic structure of another, what actually have you accomplished? In other words, A implies B, B implies C, therefore A implies C. And this is generally accepted as legitimate logic. And so when you get something like one idea implies this and that idea implies that, therefore the first idea implies the third, if you're responding to intellectual logic, how do you know that you've arrived at a correct conclusion? How do you know? How you feel about it comes into play, and your limbic system often makes decisions. Your limbic system actually sends impulses to your decision-making ideas and will create sentences that can come out of your mouth rather than the other way around. You're doing proper assessment and therefore creating a good feeling from a correct conclusion arrived from that direction. But the limbic system is often making the decisions for people because it sends a good feeling or comfort zone, which follows previous logic structures that are based on assumptions or beliefs. And when this happens, the limbic system will override the information and gathering aspects or functions of the brain and sends the signal that comes out in the individual's words that this sounds like a good idea, or this sounds right. What do you mean it sounds right? Did you do an assessment of it so that you know that it is right according to certain objective criteria rather than a subjective feeling? And the difference is just so often overlooked, except by politicians who use that, salesmen who use that to get people to say yes. A salesman might just negotiate the comfort zones of his individual that he's selling something to. And as he talks, he just observes what's making the person feel good, just like a politician would. And, in saying, well, doesn't this look great? Doesn't this sound like a great idea? And of course, at this point, the limbic system has been limbered up, and the person, of course, will say yes. And now the salesman or politician has created a pathway that the ego doesn't recognize and can't censor, and is going around the deliberation aspects of an individual's mind. And the salesman or politician can then stimulate a yes by stimulating the limbic side system. Lawyers do that in court. With a double-edged question that it doesn't matter which way you answer it, you've answered it in favor of the attorney. And that's because he hits the limbic system and not the logic part and the assessment part. And this is not noticed in court, and it's allowed, even though it's a totally bogus way of entering any kind of testimony. It just isn't presently recognized very well. Some people do. But you have to step outside of the question in order to answer it according to your own response. You don't encounter this kind of thing, specifically. There are references to assumptions. There are references, not reference to, but there are, and other things, but this is an example of a specific that works in people until they get really go into and address what's going on in their brain. And this is otherwise there's an awful lot of automatic stuff that's created by assumptions, not just assumptions, but because of assumptions. Because you have an assumption that when you feel right, you are right. You know? And this often goes unobserved. But the logical functioning is based on so many autonomous, more or less functionings within the brain that if you don't become aware of these things, you will make decisions that you think are correct simply because you get a feeling that they're correct and the logic looks correct. And that's why the intellect is not reliable for life functionings. In other words, the real aspects of life do not follow logical structures. Real life functioning differs every second. Intellectually functioning is useful for other things. Now, as regarding a teacher, I was talking to somebody and who expressed interest, kind of, he seemed like he expressed interest in these Eastern thought and affairs, and he said, well, he didn't want to travel to the East. And I said, but you don't have to. You know, we were talking, I said, there's a teacher right here. And I let that sink in for a few seconds, and then said, the universe is always teaching. You have to learn how to listen and how to respond. And it's interesting to note that if you look in a mirror, you may think, oh, there I am. But what you're seeing is not you, it's your body. And your DNA is responsible. If you'd been in charge, you'd look like a freaking mess at this point, you know, but your DNA has orchestrated everything you see, how you think, how you feel, what you eat, when you eat, what you're supposed to eat, all of that. Your DNA is responsible for. And man, you think you are intelligent. Imagine what kind of intelligence it must be, per se, as you might say, to create what you see in front of you. If you had a pile of dirt, could you build what's in front of you and then give it life? And there's a lot of assumptions that people make. Um, you know, how do you know what to do and when to do it? Or when to eat? Well, your DNA tells you when to eat if you're not overeating. How do you know when you're learning to jump or run, to discover a sweetheart, to have children, to the time to have a career, the time to, your DNA. You think you're doing this and you're doing that. You're responsible for this. And no, your DNA has been telling you what to do all along. You think your mother was bad? You think your mother was did this? No, you know, oy vey. No. It's your DNA. Sending you another little subtle request. Ah, Sean, I want a sweetheart, please. And, Sufi said, the medicine is within. And there are some things that you have to create within yourself, an awareness. How do you become attuned to your DNA's requests as opposed to what you kind of want, which maybe your DNA doesn't need, may be bad for what your DNA has in mind for you. Do you imagine you're going to plan a life's goal contrary to your DNA has in mind for you since conception? You're going to do something, make a suggestion better to your DNA when you don't even know what your DNA is composed of. I mean, schedule-wise, in the future. Well, your DNA is unwinding what's been there from birth. Before you make your own plans, why don't you learn to attune to what your DNA has been asking for all along and has constructed what you see in the mirror or how you feel within yourself. You want to become satisfied? Your DNA knows how to do this. It's been doing it since birth. Since conception. Well, there are stages. Stages when you sucked your thumb, you began whole foods, you learned to jump and run, you have friends, and then to learn things with your mind, logical things, non-logical things, experiences, blah, 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 so on, as you grew up, matured, go through life, you went from taking as a child, your mother's milk, your love and all that thing, and you matured because you were taking, and then you transitioned to be an adult, and now you have to give in order to mature. Very different. Your DNA, if you're listening to it, would tell you this. Christ would say it's more blessed to give than to receive. He's just acknowledging a biological DNA-based fact. Or the Sufis say, service is the whole deal. Service to humanity, to others is the whole deal, and it's just a fact. You know, if you're not a child, that's just the way your DNA functions. You know, it's the best way to go to mature. And so there are various stages in life, and one of those is the spiritual fulfillment, according to what the DNA has in mind, not to what Webster's dictionary might be saying. But if you're listening in tune to the voice, impulses of the DNA, requests of the DNA, your DNA, not somebody else's, but, you know, it would say, you know, I want a hamburger, you know, and so, you know, it would say that, you know, you would give your request and you would say, well, I'm feeling this request and it looks like it's to be a hamburger with cheese and mustard and, you know, onions. You know. And of course, your digestive system is in fact analyzing what you're eating and is sending you these ideas that come into your mind as physical products that you can buy. Put it into your mouth and deliver it to your system and satisfy your DNA request. And so you bring to it what it's asking for. Well, in the area of spirit, everybody has some stages, manifestation of getting satisfaction of spiritual related type questions in this stage. The various stages within the stage of spirituality, there's stages of, you know, questioning, non-belief, those kinds of things, and then there's stages when a person comes to, you know, epiphany and he adopts faith, and there's that's kinds of things going on with beliefs and having faith and those kinds of things. And some people get stuck at various stages, but there's another stage in that stage of spirituality of completion, like any stage. But where is what specifically are the requests that the DNA is sending? I mean, I don't know, with food, you know, there are requests for vitamins, minerals of various sorts, and comes out as hamburgers, cheeseburgers, spaghetti, you know, lettuce, you know, whatever. What are they in terms of the spirituality? What are the basics? Where one would say all foods contain the same basic building blocks. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, what culture, what you eat. There are requirements to build your DNA. You know, they come in different proportions, but the building blocks are common, the same. So when you have one of the first stages of spirituality is the questioning agnostics, atheists, you know, all kinds of that kind of stuff going on. And you have the faith stage where you have people adhere to a specific religion, you know. It's only this way, it's only that way, you know. Well, this isn't just indicative of the faith stage. You get tremendous wars, animosities, and allegiances, and, you know, all kinds of stuff like that going on. And some people believe that's the final stage. I mean, that's it. You acquire this faith, this belief, and you adhere to it, and it answers all these questions and all these situations, and people think that's the end all and be all. But it isn't. There's another. It may surprise you, but it has no faith. The story of the caterpillar rummaging around, eating leaves, all that kind of stuff, prey to birds and all kinds of what have you. And eventually it decides, one might say, to create a cocoon. Decides on some specific location and sets up house there and weaves itself a web of cocoon around itself, And there is a chrysalis. And inside, no more nutrient gathering, no more eating leaves. What it has gathered in the previous stage, it now utilizes in a metamorphosis within this cocoon. No input from the exterior world. The metamorphosis, if it has accumulated the right nutrients, it can go successfully to the metamorphosis, and what happens? It emerges from this stage as a butterfly. And out it comes, spreads its wings, and leaves. The last stage. But if it were to come back to the chrysalis and try to get in, that would be absurd. But if a caterpillar within its cocoon heard that a neighboring chrysalis, a butterfly had emerged and left the sanctity and sanctuary of its cocoon, it would be aghast. How could it do such a thing, right? But that's the way faith is. You have the stage of nothing really, beliefs or, all kinds of stuff going on. Then you have the stage of faith. And people who are in the stage of faith, whether they're going to emerge and go through the metamorphosis, that the DNA has that possibility, they can't fathom the stage of the butterfly. It's blasphemy, it's this, it's that, it's sacrilegious, it's self-destructive, it's, so many things that it's not. And they will never know. But the butterfly will know. It has no need of faith. Faith is important to some at a certain stage. You don't want faith before the caterpillar has gathered enough to weave a cocoon. And you don't want to emerge, and you can't go through a metamorphosis if you haven't gathered stuff in the previous stage. And each stage kind of rejects the previous or the former, right? A ladder. And except a butterfly can now see what's going on and flies off to wherever it wants to go. Now it survives on nectar. But in the cocoon stage, how do you get nutrients to your DNA? As somebody said, the medicine is within. Well, if you take a hamburger to your body, you know where to put it, to chew it, how to swallow, and your digestive system, right? You know, all orchestrated by your DNA. But what is the spiritual mouth? Where is it located for your DNA? What is the internal material? Where is that located within yourself? How do you access it? How do you process it? How do you bring it to the mouth of your DNA? And then what happens? How do you, if you'd be chewing and swat, how do you deal with your DNA now, in this specific situation, this specific stage? What do you do now that you've gone off inside and gotten what your DNA? How do you get it? You see the situation? Do you even know about this? Butterflies do exist, and they had to go through a metamorphosis. They had to utilize the food from within themselves and get it to the right areas so that their wings could form, and all this other stuff had to go on. And this analogy is true and accurate. This isn't from a book. I'm not saying this. I never read this. I'm just saying. There are certain things that you have to learn, and there are exterior sources that assist in understanding internal resources and things. You wouldn't try to build a jet airplane without internal and external resources. You just wouldn't make it in a lifetime. Why are you trying the same thing now, analogous thing now, without assistance? Ain't gonna happen. Probably, most likely, most likely. The caterpillar, the chrysalis, and the butterfly. The elephant in the dark. Another being in the light. Same problem.